So one of the things that they offered were temporary weight loss contests. Over the years of doing that program so many times, the compliance of people that started the contest that would, not even if they were successful or not, but just who would like end the contest, like get on the scale at the very end, it was less than 20%. When we started noticing that, low carbohydrates seemed to be working for so many people, we used, scales and body fat trackers to be able to tell that people were not just losing weight, they were losing body fat. We just used the framework of those 90-day, 60-day contests, and we went rogue and gave people different meal plans that were much more simple. They were much more low carbohydrate. They had fewer ingredients. People really liked them. And we just tracked our people over time just doing that. But we had over 100 people that we ended up testing over the course of doing all these 60-day contests. And sure enough, our compliance percentage was about 65%. They lost a combined 730 pounds, with 720 of those pounds coming from actual fat mass.
All right, so today I have with me Casey Ruff, personal trainer since 2007, host of the Boundless Body Radio podcast, lifestyle coach, and performance enhancement specialist. Casey has helped thousands of clients over 14 years learn how to achieve their best lifestyle through movement, lifestyle management, and proper diet. Casey, how are you today?
Doing great, Jorge. It's such an honor to be on your show. I love your podcast.
No, it's great to have you, man. I'm really glad that we connected. So I really want to get started on your work as a personal trainer first, because most healthcare professionals, if they go through the system of conventional medicine, or even if you become a nutritionist or a dietitian, basically if you're involved in healthcare at all, you go through this like one size fits all, like food pyramid, grains, all this kind of stuff. And while that's not to say that doesn't work for a few people, some people maybe it can work for a lot of people, there's a lot of things missing there. So how did you go from kind of being not growing up, but like being taught in this kind of space of, this is the only thing that'll work, super high carb, to kind of going, 180 degrees, going the opposite way?
Yeah. Don't you miss the day that you got your very first health coaching certification or nutrition coaching certification or personal training, where they laid it out in this exact way to do things? And you're like, great, I know everything there is to know about nutrition and squatting.
Yeah.
And day by day, you just chip away and learn that you know nothing more and more as the days go on. Oh boy. So I've been a certified personal trainer for 15 years actually. So it was 2007 that I got started, got certified at a big box gym and started working there and just kind of made it my career. Over time, I really enjoyed working with people. And so I've always had some, kind of an interest, at least in the background, in nutrition, especially, but I wasn't a certified nutrition coach until 2017 when I completed my precision nutrition certification. I could actually help people design meal plans and help them, set macros or whatever they wanted to do. And in that journey, it was a lot of learning and unlearning. Back at the gym that I was working at the time, we were definitely told that you needed to eat lots of fruits and vegetables. You needed to eat the rainbow. At one point, we were saying, if you're not getting 9 to 11 servings of fruits and vegetables a day that come from organic sources, you need to take multivitamins. And I did that for a long time, and it just didn't work. It was just on a practical level. If you hired me as a personal trainer because you wanted to see really good results, and you're working with me and it's been a few weeks, a few months, and you're not seeing the results that you're paying me for, that's kind of problematic. And it just that standard advice and that standard message of nutrition, it didn't work. If somebody could technically pull it off, which nobody could, but if you could, you did all the shopping, you bought all the ingredients, you made all the meals and snacks, and had, basically what is like carry-on luggage looking coolers that you take with you everywhere so you can have all that accessible. It was such a small percentage of people that could do it, and if they did, it very rarely produced the result that we were looking for anyway. And in my career, one of the cool things I had access to, and part of my job title was I was a metabolic specialist, which meant I was running a metabolic cart at my club and also overseeing that program at 13 different clubs of my company in the Western region. So I was going out traveling, teaching other personal trainers how to use a metabolic cart. And a metabolic cart is really great. It's kind of fun. What you do is you hook somebody up to a mask, which collects their respirations. And we send that data to a little box that's connected to a computer. By analyzing somebody's breathing, we know not only how many calories they're burning, not only at rest, but also while they're exercising. So, we know that if you're exercising harder, you're going to burn more calories. And as a byproduct of that, you'll be breathing heavier. So we know that's something that we can measure. And these carts would also look at the oxygen and carbon dioxide that people were breathing in and out and how those things were exchanging in the body. And so this helped us go one step further to be able to tell what fuel source somebody was burning while they were doing exercise or while they were resting. And so again, a really classic example would be like if you go for a walk, let's say the intensity is very low, you can breathe in and out calmly through your nose while you do it, you can carry on a conversation. You're not going to burn a ton of calories doing that walk, but you will burn a very high percentage of those calories from fat. Fat should be that fuel source that really helps you do low level activities for a really, really long time. That's why we store so much fat on the body. We can be alive for days if we don't get food because we can rely on the fat that's stored in our body for energy. On the flip side, if you were to do something very stressful, the body classically would like run away from something or chase something. You do that, you're definitely going to burn a lot more calories, but those calories are going to come from a different fuel source. They're going to be coming from carbohydrates. And so helping people understand those principles was really great and helpful. And we helped a lot of people not overtrain when, they were doing their exercise. But what we started to learn over time is how much the diet would impact how good somebody was at burning fat versus just burning carbohydrates. And so when I was racing, road bikes and cycling a lot, and I would be eating a very, very high carbohydrate diet, that would be my necessary fuel source. I would have to eat carbs all day, every day. I would need to take carbohydrates with me, for my bike rides. So gels and goos and all those sports nutrition products, you're heavily reliant on that because there's such a limited amount of carbohydrate that the body can store. But if you train that way, that's the only fuel that your body is going to have access to. And we started noticing wow, if people just simply put more fat in their diet, initially like olive oil or an avocado, we learned that there's such a thing as a healthy fat. It's like, I didn't think that was a thing. I thought all fat was unhealthy. Not only were people, feeling better, but we could validate it on those tests that they would be better at burning fat. And so it was really just a progression of learning what was actually working for people. And we just noticed the less carbohydrates somebody included in their diet, the more their body's metabolism would shift over to burning fat, and they would be happier, they would be losing weight much better. And so that's what kind of carried me down that progression of continually lowering the carbohydrate and in some cases increasing the fat in certain people's diets.
Yeah, wow. I mean, this is about as close as you can get to both being a researcher, but also being in the field and actually, seeing results. I think oftentimes one of my major kind of, I don't know if I'd say critiques, but something that I see that is kind of missing from food recommendations is that in a sense, they're kind of removed from the personal experiences of people. You have these large epidemiological nutrition studies, which, there's a lot of flaws in them. And as I'm sure that and so they take these thousands and thousands of people, and it's easy to make general assumptions about people. But when you're doing what you're doing, you're working one-on-one with people or in small groups, like you can really get to see, especially with the metabolic cart that you said, you get to see the actual data points of, okay, what is this individual person? What is the CO2, O2 differences in this person? And also, how are they feeling, right? It's not just the objective, but it's also, you're talking about the subjective there too, that you're getting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you pointed that out. It is really important to use both and validate both. We need the researchers, we need the people on the ground. It was really unique, and I really appreciated that time that I had to do that. We also tried to be really pragmatic with things that the gym had already set up. And so one of the things that they offered were temporary weight loss contests, which started out as they would offer like a 90-day weight loss contest twice a year. And they made a ton of money when they did it. People would buy sessions and supplements and all this stuff to be super motivated. But the company made so much money, they switched it to do 60-day challenges 4 times a year. So they made even more money by doing that. And so basically we would have, as trainers, we would be, we would have expectations. We'd have to sign up so many number of people to be able to do this. And we give them all the materials the company gave us, which is like 100 pages of recipes and shopping lists. And here's all these workout programs and all these different events on, Tuesdays or Saturdays you have to come to and learn all this stuff. And, the program was fine, but literally like over the years of doing that program so many times, the compliance of people that started the contest that would, not even if they were successful or not, but just who would like end the contest, like get on the scale at the very end, it was less than 20%. Like the fail rate of just getting through that 90 days, even if you saw no results, was like, I don't know, 15%, 18%, something like that. And so when we started noticing that, low carbohydrates seemed to be working for so many people, we used, scales and body fat trackers to be able to tell that people were not just losing weight, they were losing body fat. We just used the framework of those 90-day, 60-day contests, and we went rogue and gave people different meal plans that were much more simple. They were much more low carbohydrate. They had fewer ingredients. People really liked them. And we just tracked our people over time just doing that. And again, this isn't like perfect research, but we had over 100 people that we ended up testing over the course of doing all these 60-day contests. And sure enough, our compliance percentage was about 65%. So much more compliance. It was far easier for people to stick with it. And the total numbers of those, of the people that finished, it was over 100. I want to say it was like 126. They lost a combined 730 pounds, with 720 of those pounds coming from actual fat mass, validated on a reputable body fat scale. And so, again, not a perfect study, but it's very practical and repeatable. And it was across a lot of different populations: men, women, older people, younger people, people that wanted to lose fat, other people wanted to gain muscle, or some people wanted to do yoga. It was all kinds of different people, but just offering them an alternative, which was, again, very simple, low carbohydrate diets. The results were remarkable. I was even blown away. I thought it would really work, but it really surprised me.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. This is this is something that fascinates me because we kind of all know the different opposing perspectives where you have the calories in, calories out people, where you can basically, the flexible dieting people, like the person that comes to mind is Dr. Lane Norton. He's like the big guy in that area, right? And so
exactly what I was thinking of too. Perfect.
Yeah, right. So for me, it's difficult because how is it that if you look at the research, right, you see that basically the best diet is the diet that you can stick to. And I think for the most part, I think that's been true in my experience with my clients. And it appears to be true, right? But then again, individual by individual, it's going to be different. And so for you, what do you think it was about the specific, simple low carb approach that you were taking? What was it about that made it so that it was easier to comply with for your clients?
Great question. That's a really great question. I think the biggest thing and the reason why these meal plans worked is, first of all, like you said, they were very simple. They took very few ingredients, but also there's no limitation. We told people, like, you can only stop eating unless you're like extremely full. When you're fully satiated, that's when you can stop. Like, don't eat 4 eggs if you think you can eat 5 eggs or whatever. And I think so many people have that idea, the calories in, calories out equation. And I'm not going to sit here and say that equation doesn't work, but I am going to say that most of us look at it in the incorrect manner. We look at the calories in, calories out model as something that's very simplistic, where let's reduce our calories that we're consuming down. Let's increase the calories that we're burning by exercising. And what that does is creates this environment in our bodies that tells ourselves that we're not getting enough calories and we're literally out running around looking for food. Well, that's just going to put your body in economy mode. Your body's going to want to slow down and hold on to things. It's going to want to hold on to visceral fat. Your body temperature is going to drop. And so you'll definitely notice like cold hands and feet when you do that. And that visceral fat is to help protect the organs and keep the organs warm as the body is literally trying to shut it down. That's why people get really tired. They get very hungry. They crave things that are very high in calories. Since they're not getting enough calories, they want, donuts and cookies and a big, combination of fat and carbohydrates that we don't really see in nature. And so sure enough, when we look at the calories in, calories out model in that way, we create the perfect formula for weight gain and fat gain. We are making people in this perfect state of like, you're going to gain a bunch of fat. When this is done, which it will be, 4, 5, 6 weeks of the best willpower you've ever had is going to carry you that far. But you're going to be cold and tired and have tons of cravings. And now your body is primed. You give it some calories and it's going to hoard all of those calories. It already slowed itself down to be able to protect you. And so you're going to gain weight and you're going to start the next time around at a much higher weight. So we go back to that question, say like, why do we think this worked? I think it's because we looked at that equation in a different way. We say, okay, if dieting and calorie restriction and heavy exercise is going to reduce the resting metabolic rate, what things can boost the resting metabolic rate? Why don't we just teach our bodies to burn lots of calories all the time on their own naturally, in a way that people don't really feel that hungry, they have more energy. Let's tell the body it's really safe. um, Plenty of calories are around, and when we focus the diet on getting a lot of animal proteins with animal fats, I think that's a really optimal way to tell the body that it can keep that metabolic rate really high, combined with giving people the right exercise rather than going out and burning a ton of calories. Let's teach your body to be inefficient with calories, and let's build some muscle mass. Let's get some more muscle tissue on you, because that will create inefficiency. Your body will burn more calories when you do that. And so again, you go back to that formula, and it's the same formula either way. It's just looking at it a way that we can either white knuckle it for a short amount of time, or we can teach the body that it's safe and everything's fine, and it can continue burning off the calories that it already has.
100%. And I think, people like Dr. Lane Norton, it's not that I was trying to bash him with that comment. I actually get a lot of really valuable information from people like him, because I do think calories in, calories out is, I mean, it's probably true. I mean, I don't see how that can not be true. Now, obviously, we have to take into account hormones and things that change your resting metabolic rate, and things that, for example, protein. I believe it's like 30% of the amount of protein that you're getting is actually your body actually uses that energy in order to digest it. So you're actually
Right.
not getting the 100% of the calories from the protein, you're getting 70% because it's so energy intensive for your digestive system. And similar thing with fiber, actually, which we can kind of argue on whether or not fiber is like as helpful as you think it
Sure.
is in certain instances, which I think is true. It, especially for me, I don't really have a especially good time with certain types of fibers than others. But all these things do play into this kind of calorie formula. But I think you're 100% right. It's like, let's not do what well, for in my opinion, the flexible dieting thing is only so helpful, because you can eat the breads and the pastas and like all these things, and you can do a Twinkie diet. There was that professor in nutrition, I don't remember his name, but
That's
you
right.
know he did that Twinkie diet, right? And he lost like 30 pounds. But what he probably neglected to mention is how shitty he felt. His
Yep.
sleep probably suffered. Where did that weight loss come from? We want fat loss, not weight loss, right? And so there are all these other factors that play into dietary compliance over the long term that we need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I love that. That's a really great point. I was listening to somebody's content not too long ago, and they said sugar is fine in moderation. And it's like, yeah, like I agree. Who can moderate sugar? Let's start with, how can you moderate sugar? I can't moderate sugar. I
Yeah.
have to have a zero sugar diet, because if I have some, I'm going to have more. And then I'm going to feel terrible, and I'm going to have horrible anxiety. It's not worth it. And I was always the person, as I was doing my nutrition coaching and all the certifications, that like I love moderation. I would love to tell people all the time, like, it's okay if you're not on your diet the best all the time. You can go to the birthday parties, you can have the holiday parties, and you just get back on afterwards. And you're right, like, yeah, that might be true, but you might also start the 50-pound weight gain and send it fully down that path for months and months and months. I've seen people do that, where they're really on point with their diet, they go on the trip, and yeah, they didn't eat the best, but they never recovered, they didn't go back to what they were doing, and they gained tons and tons of weight. And so you really have to, when you're working with people, as you well know, as a health coach, you really have to understand, like, is this person somebody who can moderate, or is this somebody who needs to abstain? And that's where I get a little value out of something that's really strict. It makes it really simple. Like, if I say I'm on carnivore, I'm only eating meat, you just walk through the store, you go right to the places where you need to go. It's just not a question. It makes things a little bit simple. So we need to understand our people a little bit better and ask questions. But I think it becomes harder when there are those questionable things that I practically, I don't think work for many people.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. You brought up a really good point, which is, who can moderate sugar, right? Like in our environment, everything is added. Sugar is added to everything, basically. Like you have it on, ketchup and, sauces, and every packaged food you can think of probably has some amount of sugar. And you're right. Like I've had clients where they even touch like fruit and they're off the rails because they get that little taste of sweetness and they're gone and they can't control it. And so for the people that really have this sort of like addictive like tendencies towards foods and towards sugar, which is by nature very can be very addicting, then yeah, it's better for that person to stay on a lower carb diet because that's how they can stick to their goals.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a really good point. And maybe we could point out the difference in our locations to hammer home this point. I'm looking at you. You're in
Yeah.
Costa Rica. Looks absolutely gorgeous. It's amazing. Tell
Yeah.
me about the food that grows around there. Like, do you see a lot of food that's growing that's available, such as fruits?
So this is the crazy thing, right? I got here the first time, and in my head it was like, oh, Costa Rica. It's always green. There's always fruits year round. And then I was here for longer, and I got here right now. This is actually technically the winter, right? And so nothing grows naturally. Like I'm telling
Wow.
you, such few fruit grows. And so I was this whole paradigm for me was turned on its head because I was like, oh shit, we did not evolve eating plentiful fruits and carbs year round. We
Wow.
simply didn't. Not even in near the equator, right? Where you have plenty of sunlight and you expect there to be mangoes and bananas and coconuts all
Yeah.
year round.
Yeah.
That's just not the case, not even here. And so if I can imagine what it must have been like in Michigan, where I'm from, like that's even worse, right? You only get like 1 or 2 months out of the year where you're getting fruits or something like that, right? And
Wow.
so
Yeah.
for me, it was like you're exactly right. Seasonal, food changes with the seasons, the availability of food, and it's not you don't get your choice like you do at Whole Foods nowadays, right?
So different. Yeah, I mean, I think about here in Salt Lake City. Like, I walk around, the lake by our house every single day. I watch sunrise and make sure I expose my eyes to the sun, which I absolutely love. You did a recent podcast episode about that, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at so much diversity. There are so many different plants that are growing, so many different birds, and it's great. But there's nothing edible. Like, if I had to live on the things that grow around me, I would die. Like, surely, like, there's no way I could survive. And it's the middle of summer. Like, we're getting into the part where fruits are going to start popping up on different trees, and they're really tasty. And I'll have one and eat one and throw the seeds somewhere. But I notice when I have them, they make me very hungry afterwards. They're really small. If you pick them, like, we have strawberries that grow by our house. If you pick them and leave them out, like, even at a cold countertop in the shade, within 10 hours, they're back. Like, they don't last very
Yeah.
long. And you definitely don't dip these in chocolate. And I think back to something that Dr. Bill Schindler said. He's a mutual friend of both of ours.
Yeah.
When you were talking to him, and it's like fruit is very, very different than what you are accustomed to, what you see at Whole Foods. When you go buy, a cellophane wrapped tray of 12 softball sized apples, that's a really recent thing. That's
Yeah.
different than a natural apple, which is really small and tart, and you
Yes.
don't get it all year. So I think
Yeah.
those are important points to consider. And keep in mind, we're talking about like relatively healthy foods. Like, I would way rather you have a store bought apple than have, the disaster that you can get at the soda store,
Of
with a
course.
sugar cookie. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
No,
it's interesting.
yeah, exactly. No, and I actually that was the crazy thing when I first got here too. It was like I saw the apples, exactly the apples, what you're talking about. And I saw they were like tiny, like not even the size of my hand. They were like half the size of my hand. And
Wow.
it was like 3, 4 bites, and I was done with the apple. It's like, oh well, I need to eat 3 or 4 of these to get the same amount as I'd get in a GMO store and in the
Wow.
States, right?
Yeah, crazy. I'm a little surprised by your answer too. I would have thought for sure, like, yeah, we get some. It's not a lot, but there's some out there. But yeah, that surprised me a little bit myself.
Yeah, no, it's like right now it's the core of the rainy season. There's barely any sunlight. If we do get any sunlight, it's early in the morning, so you don't get
Wow,
that UV intensity that you'd get in order to actually grow those plants. So
interesting.
so yeah, I mean, we're pretty much just I guess traditionally without agriculture, you would have had much less access to grains
Wow,
and carbohydrates and
yeah,
things like that. Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
agree.
No
Interesting.
question about that. So I wanted to touch on something that you brought up earlier, actually. So you said, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this is what I heard. You said that there was when you were measuring the kind of ratios of carbon dioxide and oxygen that you kind of breathe in and breathe out, when you were at lower intensities, you're burning more fat. And I always think about this like fuel oxidation and like intensity of exercise scale. That's something that when I started out with keto, that was always something that got brought up. It was like, oh, well, you need carbs because at 50% of intensity, you start being reliant on carbs, right? You stop burning fat. At lower intensities, you burn a lot of the fat. And then once you get to the higher ones, you tap into the glycogen and you really use that for the higher intensity stuff, right? And so for a lot of people, in the kind of conventional paradigm, it's, oh, well, that just means that I need to do cardio all the time because that's how I burn fat. And so you mentioned something about building muscle, and obviously you're not going to build much muscle doing cardio. And you talked about the importance of building muscle. So tell me about your approach there, because I'm assuming it's not doing cardio all the time.
Yeah, it's not. It was
Yeah.
at one time. No, it's really not, and it's part of that understanding of what's going to be the effect of the message I'm sending to my body with what I'm trying to do. So, running is probably a really good example. As humans, we evolved doing persistence hunting, as you well know.
Hmm.
We have a really interesting speed curve that's a lot flatter than other animals, where we can travel very efficiently at various different speeds, where a lot of different animals kind of max out at a certain speed and they're less efficient on that U curve. With humans, it's more, we can sprint, we can run, we can trot, we can walk, and we're fairly efficient in all those different activities. But to be able to chase animals down, we need to do more persistent hunting. And to be able to do that, if you think of a world, around you, a natural landscape where food is really scarce, we really want to be economical and efficient with our calories. And so if I'm running a lot at a low level for a really long time, I'm going to create some efficiency. I'm going to get better. My stride's going to be more efficient. You can track this on runners by using things like vertical oscillation, or how much are they bouncing up and down when they run. If I were to go out for a 3 mile run right now, I would look like a disaster because I don't run. I hardly ever run. But if I
Yeah.
did that for several months, my form would be better. My gait would be much better, and I would be able to do that 3 mile run on less calories because I would be more efficient. And again, in a natural landscape, that's great. That's exactly what we want. If I can burn less calories, then I don't need to eat as much. I'm not as reliant on catching food every single day. And so in that environment, that's fine. But when we change the environment around us, and now we have carbohydrates year round, processed carbohydrates, seed oils, calories are plentiful. They're everywhere. Well, now that kind of changes things a little bit. And when we're doing that kind of running, and we're teaching our bodies to be more efficient with calories, that's going to be very difficult when we have so much food around us. And the worst thing that I see, even taking that one step further, is the thing that I saw with people in the gym, where they would join the gym in January, like we said, and they jump on the treadmill and they would run at an intensity that would be very high, but it would be very maintainable. So like on a scale of 1 to 10, they would be running at like a 7 or an 8, mouth breathing, huffing and puffing, sweating a lot, but you can maintain it for a really long time, 45 minutes, an
Right.
hour. The treadmill says they burn 700 calories. That was that form of activity. But what they're doing burns a lot of calories. So now you're going to crave a lot of calories. The primary fuel source, like you mentioned, is carbohydrate to fuel that type of intensity. So now
Right.
you're going to crave more carbohydrates. And all the while, you're becoming more and more efficient, which is taking your metabolic rate down, not only while you exercise, but it also has that same effect at rest. And so it really compounds the problem that most people have, where they're going out and eating too many carbohydrates as is. And we don't want to create we don't want to create efficiency if somebody's trying to burn off an excess. We want inefficiency. We want to tell the body, we want to get after this energy that we've been storing for years and years and years in the form of body fat. And so, yeah, chronic cardio I find to be one of the most unhelpful things for most people in their goals. And if they really are thoughtful and sit down and think about what they want and what they want to create for people, I think more people would understand that, like, yeah, doing several half marathons a year, that's a really cool accomplishment and something you should be really proud of. But it may or may not line up with your actual goals, and it may not be the healthiest thing for you.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I was a swimmer for 10 plus years, a competitive swimmer, and I did it in college too. And
In
it
Michigan,
it drained, yeah, in Michigan, and it drained the
that's
shit out of me.
serious,
It,
serious swimming.
yeah, no, and it drained me, right? And I started really competitively when I was like 9. That's when I buckled down and I started doing like, the 2 a days, 2 hour practices plus weightlifting, and so
Oof.
for me, I could never put on muscle, right? And so I just thought, oh, it's a genetic thing, I just can't put on muscle. Oh well, sucks, but I'll keep going and keep doing the cardio thing. I was I wasn't skinny fat only because I was doing so much exercise and my diet was like relatively good. But I did not have very much muscle on me at all. I
Wow.
didn't have very much fat on me either, but I was just so skinny. And so for
Wow.
people to look and they would see me and say, "Oh, he's so skinny. Wow, like that's like so healthy." Because you could see my muscles peeking out, but it wasn't because I was muscular. It was because I just was just like not even shredded, because that's a better connotation. But
More like
I
emaciated almost.
emaciated. That's exactly the word. That is
Wow.
exactly the word. And I actually have a picture. I'm going to share it on my Instagram probably at some point. I was like
Great.
158 pounds at 6'2". right? And so that's,
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So it was not healthy, and that's not a healthy approach. Doing that much cardio for me, I mean, I was doing probably like 10,000 yards a day, probably on most days of swimming. And
That's crazy.
so yeah, so that's not a healthy approach. And I totally agree with you. For me, when I stopped swimming, when I quit swimming, I was really focused on the muscle building aspect. And lo and behold, when I wasn't doing that much cardio, I started sleeping better, my stress went down, my mental health got better, my gut health got better, everything got better. And I started actually
Wow.
putting on muscle for the first time. And so that's the approach, right? It's like, let's stop doing this chronic cardio thing. And I know, I don't know if you know this study, I actually wrote a paper for my physiology class about it. They did a study on the Hadza, a metabolic study, where they kind of followed them around throughout their whole day. And their hypothesis was, well, these Hadza are super lean because look at how much activity they do. They walk around for hours every single day, and they walk for miles and miles and miles every day, for basically like 24/7 they're moving. And so they're like, oh, well, that's why they're lean compared to us in the Western world. And it's like, they actually got the results back and they found they don't burn any more calories than we do. And
Yeah.
so
Surprising.
surprising, right? And so that tells us that it's the food that's the lever. It's the
Yeah.
nutrition that's the lever for our food.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. We've interviewed Dr. Herman Poncer, who wrote the book Burn, all about the Hadza, and he was part of that study and what they were looking at. And yeah, he was really surprised, as I think a lot of people were surprised. And so, yeah, I think that's a really good point. If we can flip that paradigm and have people again not overstressing, like you said, not doing chronic amounts of cardio, let's bring it down a little bit. Let's bring the intensity down. Go on a walk. It's so much more enjoyable anyway. Go get that sunlight, go get that fresh
Yeah.
air, maybe some temperature exposure, hot or cold, and
Right.
use that low intensity exercise to burn less calories but burn more fat is tremendous.
Yes.
And then when
Right.
we get people focusing on recovery, getting adequate protein, and then now let's lift a heavy weight that tells the body that its current level of strength is not adequate. Now the body is forced to get stronger. It
Hmm.
doesn't like to. It's evolved in that efficiency mindset. But if you push something really, really heavy and the body thinks it can't do it, it only understands that it has to get stronger. So that's when
Yeah.
it starts shoveling resources over to let's get strong, let's build some muscle fibers, let's make the bones and connective tissue much stronger. There's so many benefits that way. And it really has been scientifically shown to have cardiovascular benefits as well. And so this term of, cardio and even jogging and running and all these things, they're really quite recent. It's kind of like aerobics were something that was done in like the 60s and 70s, really kind of for the first time. And so when we can step away from that a little bit, I do think we can do a much better job of actually creating health and burning fat.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, unfortunately, I don't have enough time to keep going. I would love to continue this conversation. I will have you back at some point again when you're available. But for now, I wanted to end on a question that I'm going to start asking everyone on the podcast.
All
So for
right.
you, what are the books, the podcasts, the people that have made the greatest impact on your life?
That is a tremendous question. That's a tremendous question. Wow. Okay. Let's start with podcasts. I would say the most impactful that I've come across. I'll name two. So first one I would say would be Peak Human by Brian Sanders. He's done just such a wonderful job over the years, talking to a lot of the guests that now you and I have both been able to host. And talk to. And I think he's done a really great job presenting the case in a really kind of friendly and open way. And so I've really enjoyed that one over the years. I never miss an episode of Peter Attia's The Drive podcast. I love that
Yes,
one.
me too.
That has been very impactful in the way that I think about certain things. And podcasting in general, it's just such an amazing way to learn all kinds of different content, and it's free. I mean, you're putting this podcast out, I don't have to pay for it. I can listen to all your amazing guests, and it's really amazing. It's a great way to learn. Where 20 years ago, you'd have to go to school, you'd have to join a library or whatever. Like it would be vastly, vastly different. And so I really appreciate those for podcasts. I would say with books, probably the most influential would be The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz. Definitely changing the way I think about nutrition and the nutritional guidelines. But I will also say this is a tremendous book that just came out. I've already read it twice, and I would say it's very, very impactful, really comprehensive. It's called The Great Plant-Based Con by Jane Buxton. And
Interesting. Yeah.
she does an incredible job. Not necessarily to say that that plants are bad for you, but the plant-based movement. I mean, the subtitle is why eating a plants-only diet won't improve your health or save the planet. And so it's a great title, and it really goes in depth into a lot of different things about the plant-based movement, and talking about the things you're going to be deficient in, the things you're going to have too much of, who makes all the money, how pharma is benefiting, how the Seventh Day Adventist Church has a huge influence in nutrition, and they have for decades and centuries. It's quite interesting. She did a great job that way. So it is a newer book. It just came out, but I would say that is a very highly impactful book.
I'm gonna check that out actually. Yeah, and I would love to reach out and see if I could have him on the podcast. Yeah.
She's great. She's an awesome guest. We had a really great time talking to her. She was great.
Awesome. And is there anything else you want to leave the listeners with? Anything that for you, you wish you would have heard, or you've heard recently that's inspiring or motivating to you?
Oh man, you ask great questions. um, you know, I think back on the episode that you did with Mickey Bendor, and when people, in my opinion, I think this is a really good litmus test. When people explain things in a way that's so simple that leaves you like it leaves you with all of these different questions answered and makes the most sense. I think that's when you're following the right path. When somebody's explaining something and you're getting more questions, or there's more paradoxes or things that don't quite make sense, I tend to not kind of go down that path. And so it's been great in this world of nutrition, people questioning the paradigms and seeing these amazing results. And it's simple. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. And I think health and fitness is very much that way. It can be really simple. You can go on walks. You can eat more simply. You can do intermittent fasting very easily once you're on the right things. And things like sunlight and the fresh air and like lifting weights. Those things can be done really free most of the time. And so find ways to be really pragmatic and be simple with your health. I think that's where the best answers are.
Beautiful. And where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so the best place to go is our website, which is myboundlessbody.com. And on our page, there's a book now button where people can book a complimentary 30-minute session with us, really to chat about anything they like. They can also book a 30-minute functional movement screening, which we do with a little bit of creativity over Zoom, where we basically take somebody through a standardized movement test to help them see like if you have movement deficiencies and where we can work on mobility, or where we can work on stability, and what parts of the body can be strong so you can continue moving well for the rest of your life. So all that's free. We offer that on our website, which again is myboundlessbody.com. And there people can find the blog that I very, very occasionally write on. They can find our, social media stuff, and they can find our podcast.
Perfect. I'll link to those in the show notes for everyone to have. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, Jorge. Always a pleasure.